Sometimes the smallest voice on the street asks the biggest question a person will ever face. The black Rolls-Royce slowed at a red light on Lexington Avenue, its polished surface reflecting the bright Manhattan morning as people rushed past with coffee cups and briefcases, too busy to notice anything except their own schedules. But one person noticed the car, a small girl with braids and worn sneakers who suddenly ran straight toward it, as if it were the only thing in the world that mattered, her hand hitting the dark window with a soft thud that made the driver glance in the mirror. While inside the back seat, William Carter, the billionaire founder of Carter Dynamics, looked up from the contract glowing on his tablet, because in exactly 9 minutes he was supposed to walk into a boardroom 3 blocks away and finalize an $800 million acquisition that Financial News had already called the deal of the year. Yet outside the window stood a girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old, breathing fast from running, her eyes wide with the kind of urgency no child should carry. And when the driver lowered the window an inch, she leaned forward and said in a trembling voice, "Please, sir, my mom needs help." The words so simple they almost disappeared beneath the honking taxis and rumbling buses. But William heard them clearly, heard them the same way everyone on the sidewalk did, because the girl wasn't whispering. She was asking the only way someone asks when time feels like it's running out. "She can't breathe, and I don't know what to do." And for a moment the city seemed to pause around the car, pedestrians slowing, a man across the street lifting his phone as if he already sensed something worth recording. While inside the car, William Carter checked his watch again. 8 minutes now. His assistant Laura Bennett sitting beside him quietly reminding him that the investors waiting downtown had flown in from 3 different states, and delaying a meeting like this could cost millions, maybe more. Yet outside the window the girl stayed exactly where she was, her small hands gripping the edge of the glass, refusing to step away even as the traffic light turned green and horns began to sound behind them, and the driver asked softly, "Sir?" Because Manhattan traffic does not wait for moral decisions. But the girl looked directly at William as if she believed somehow that this stranger in an expensive suit was the one person who could change what happened next. "Please," she said again. "My mom is upstairs and she needs to get to the hospital." And something about the way she said hospital made several people on the sidewalk stop walking altogether, because everyone understands that word. Everyone knows it usually means the clock has already started counting down. Yet the strange thing was that the girl wasn't crying the way children usually cry when they are scared. She was steady, determined, as if asking this question was the only plan she had left, and the entire street seemed to be waiting for what the billionaire in the back seat would do next. William Carter did not answer immediately, and that silence stretched across the intersection longer than the red light ever had, because the city was still moving around them while the decision inside the car had frozen time for everyone watching, and the girl kept holding the edge of the window, as if letting go might erase her last chance, while behind the Rolls-Royce a taxi driver leaned on his horn and shouted something impatient that disappeared into the morning traffic, but William barely heard any of it because Laura Bennett leaned slightly closer and spoke quietly, but firmly reminding him that the investors were already seated at the conference table downtown, and that the meeting had been scheduled for weeks, and that the moment the clock reached 9:05 the entire deal might disappear, and William Carter was not a man who lost deals because he hesitated. Yet outside the window the girl spoke again, this time slower, as if she wanted every word to land clearly. "Please, sir," she said, "my mom cannot breathe, and I do not know who else to ask." And that sentence did something strange to the atmosphere around the car, because several pedestrians who had been walking past suddenly stopped. A man with a messenger bag paused mid-step, and a woman, holding a cup of coffee, lowered it slowly while the sound of traffic continued. But the focus of the street shifted toward the small moment happening beside the black car. The driver glanced again in the rearview mirror, waiting for instructions, while the digital clock on William's tablet showed 7 minutes remaining before the most important meeting of the quarter, and Laura continued calmly explaining that emergency services could be called within seconds, and that trained responders were always the safest option, and that the responsible thing was to let professionals handle the situation. But the girl shook her head immediately, as if she had already tried everything. "I called, but they said it might take a while," she said, and the way she said "a while" carried a weight that no schedule could measure. Then she pointed back toward an aging brick apartment building half a block away, the kind of building most executives drove past without noticing, and she added quietly, "She is on the 4th floor, and she cannot walk." And for the first time, William Carter looked away from the tablet completely and studied the girl standing beside the car, noticing details he had not noticed before: the scuffed toes of her sneakers, the worn straps of a small backpack, and the determined way she kept standing there even though every sign around her said she should step back and let the luxury car disappear into traffic, because people like William Carter did not normally change their plans for strangers. Yet the longer he looked at the girl, the clearer it became that she had not chosen the Rolls-Royce because it was expensive. She had chosen it because it was the first car that had stopped long enough for her to knock in. Suddenly the question in the air was no longer outside the window. The girl stepped back automatically as the car pulled away because she understood something many adults never learned, which was that sometimes the world keeps moving even when you ask it to stop, and the small crowd that had gathered began to disperse as well, because Manhattan did not pause for long, and within seconds the black car was halfway down the block, while the girl stood frozen on the sidewalk staring after it, as if watching the last lifeboat disappear over the horizon. And then the moment finally broke as her shoulders dropped slightly, and she wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt before turning slowly back toward the brick apartment building behind her, while inside the car Laura Bennett exhaled quietly, the way someone does when a complicated situation resolves itself, and she began opening her tablet to review the talking points for the meeting, explaining that the investors would likely begin with the technology integration questions, and that William should lead with the expansion projections because confidence always set the tone for negotiations. Yet William Carter was not listening to the words anymore, because something about the girl's voice had followed them into the car like an echo that refused to disappear, and as the Rolls-Royce reached the next intersection, he looked out the window again, noticing details that had not mattered before: the faded grocery store sign on the corner, the cracked sidewalk leading to the apartment entrance, the 4th floor window the girl had pointed to, and suddenly the distance between those windows and the boardroom downtown felt strangely different, as if the city itself had placed two entirely separate worlds only a few blocks apart, while the driver spoke again, asking if he should take Park Avenue to avoid the heavier traffic, and Laura checked the time, reminding him that they now had 5 minutes remaining, which meant every second counted. But William Carter continued staring out the window in silence until something unexpected happened. The car passed a small neighborhood clinic, and the blue emergency sign outside flickered in the morning light. And in that instant a memory rose so quickly that he could almost hear it again: the sound of his own mother's voice from many years ago, asking someone on a busy street for help, while people hurried past because they had places to be and schedules to keep and meetings that could not wait. And the memory was so sudden that William leaned forward slightly and spoke two quiet words that stopped the entire car. "Turn around," while Laura looked at him in surprise, and the driver hesitated only a moment before steering smoothly toward the next corner to make the turn, because sometimes the most important decisions do not sound dramatic at all. They sound simple and calm, like someone correcting the direction of a car. The Rolls-Royce completed the smooth turn at the corner and began moving back down the same street it had just left, while Laura Bennett looked at William Carter with quiet disbelief, because in the years she had worked for him, she had seen him cancel flights, delay board meetings, and renegotiate billion-dollar contracts. But she had never seen him reverse direction in the middle of Manhattan traffic for someone he had met less than a minute earlier, and the driver slowed slightly as they approached the same intersection where the small crowd had already thinned, and for a moment it seemed possible that the girl might already be gone because the city had resumed its normal rhythm: pedestrians walking, taxis honking, delivery trucks blocking half the lane. Yet just as the car rolled closer, the driver pointed gently toward the sidewalk and said, "There she is," and William looked up to see the girl again standing near the apartment entrance, exactly where she had been, except now her posture had changed because the determination she carried earlier had softened into uncertainty, as if she had already begun preparing herself for disappointment. And when the black car stopped beside the curb again, her eyes widened with surprise so quickly that the emotion traveled across her face before she could hide it, and William opened the door before Laura could even speak, stepping out onto the sidewalk in a tailored suit that looked strangely out of place against the worn brick of the building, while the driver quietly moved around the car, and the girl stared at him as if she needed to confirm that the moment was real. You said your mother is upstairs, William said calmly, and the girl nodded immediately, pointing toward the narrow stairwell inside the building, 4th floor. She answered quickly, her voice steady again, now that hope had returned, and William glanced once toward Laura, who had stepped out behind him holding her phone and checking the time again, because the meeting downtown had already started and investors did not wait for late arrivals. But William did not comment on the schedule. He simply gestured toward the entrance and said, "Show me." While the small group moved toward the door, the people still nearby watched with growing curiosity, because it was not every morning that a luxury car stopped in front of an aging apartment building, and a well-known executive walked inside following a 10-year-old girl carrying a worn backpack, and the stairwell smelled faintly of laundry soap and old paint as they began climbing the steps one floor at a time, while the girl moved quickly, glancing back every few seconds to make sure William was still behind her, and Laura followed, as well, quietly speaking into her phone to inform the downtown office that Mr. Carter might be delayed, although she did not explain why, because even she was still trying to understand the decision herself. And by the time they reached the 4th floor, the girl had already reached the door at the end of the narrow hallway, where she paused only long enough to push it open and say softly, "Mom, I found someone who can help," while William Carter stepped inside a small apartment where the quiet urgency of the moment became unmistakable. The street, but something real and immediate. The woman attempted a polite smile, even though speaking clearly required effort. "I am sorry," she said softly, "my daughter probably worried you, but I will be all right," while the girl quickly shook her head and looked back at William as if asking him not to believe that reassurance, because children often recognize the truth adults try to soften. And Laura Bennett stepped forward quietly, already dialing emergency services, while William moved closer, speaking calmly to the woman, asking a few simple questions about how she was feeling and when the discomfort had started, because although he was not a doctor, he understood enough to recognize that waiting would not help. And the girl explained quickly that her mother had begun feeling unwell earlier that morning and had tried to stand, but could not walk down the stairs without becoming dizzy, which was why she had run outside searching for someone who might help them reach a hospital. While Laura finished the call and confirmed that an ambulance was on the way, but the estimated arrival time was uncertain due to traffic across several neighborhoods. And the girl looked from Laura to William again, as if calculating the distance between hope and time, because sometimes waiting even a few minutes can feel endless when someone you love needs help. And William glanced briefly toward the hallway window, noticing the familiar skyline of Manhattan rising in the distance where the meeting he had planned for weeks was now already underway, and he understood exactly what his schedule demanded. But he also understood something else that the girl had understood from the moment she ran to the car, that help does not always arrive in the form people expect. And after a brief pause, he looked back at the girl and spoke in the same steady voice he had used in boardrooms across the country, "We are going to get your mother to the hospital right now." And the relief that crossed the girl's face was immediate and had now begun without him, but he did not reach for his tablet or make any attempt to explain his absence, because the priority inside the car was now unmistakably clear. And the girl looked up at him from the back seat with quiet gratitude in her eyes, as if she was still surprised that someone had actually chosen to help. While the skyline of Manhattan moved past the windows, and the hospital sign several blocks ahead began to come into view, signaling that they were getting closer with every passing moment. As they approached the final intersection before the hospital, where the familiar blue emergency sign became visible above the entrance, and several medical staff members could already be seen preparing a wheelchair near the doorway, while Laura glanced again at her phone, noticing several missed calls from the downtown office, where the meeting had now been underway for more than 20 minutes, and she hesitated before speaking, quietly reminding William that the investors would soon begin, asking